Your first round pick in fantasy football could make or break your entire fantasy football season. It could be, oh yeah, I beat all of my stupid coworkers in a league, or it could be my stupid coworkers just beat me in fantasy football. And so whether or not you take somebody like Saquon Barkley, who we're going to talk about in this video, who we have good reason to be a little bit worried about, that could impact if you win or not. You're going to want to see the data that we have on running backs specifically and their workloads in the season before what they posted the season we're talking about. And it's probably going to change your mind on some of your first round strategy for your fantasy football drafts. Take it away.
So really what we're going to talk about here is like quote unquote high touch seasons. You've probably heard about this before. Plenty of, Twitter professionals have been all over this for a couple of years where they talk about, hey, this guy is essentially guaranteed to regress because he's been over this threshold of touches in the following year. If you ever break that threshold, you're not going to match what you were able to do the year that you had a ton of those opportunities. So we kind of wanted to dive into this and see if this is actually true. See if this is, a guarantee that a guy like Saquon Barkley, with the amount of opportunities and touches he got last season, which I believe was 482 touches, including the playoffs, is, guaranteed to regress here. So looking at some of the years dating back all the way to 2016, David Johnson, 373 touches. And the next season, he was injured for the entire season. So he had 15 points in game one, and then I think he tore his ACL. Le'Veon Bell, 406 touches. The following season that he played, might I add, because he skipped a season between 2015 or 2017 and 2019 because of the franchise tag stuff. He had significant regression, 38% regression on a points per game perspective. Ezekiel Elliott in 2018, 381 touches. He had 5% regression, played 16 games the following year, so he did not miss time and had, let's be honest, marginal regression there. CMC in 2019, 403 touches. He missed almost the entire season the following year, only playing 3 total games. Derrick Henry, 2020, 397 touches. He only played 8 games the following year. If you remember, Derrick Henry, year after year, has really been, certified pretty reliable and doesn't get banged up. He's the guy that bangs other people up. And that was one of the few years where he actually missed a significant amount of time and broke his foot that season. JT, obviously, he had a historic 2021 season with 372 touches. He misses a ton of time the following year. He misses, I think, like 5 games. And on a per-game basis was not nearly as impressive. Najee Harris in 2021 as a rookie, 381 touches. And then Derrick Henry again in 2022. The following year, he had a 25% regression in production. And then Jacobs, same year, 2022. What that story was in Vegas the following season. Saquon Barkley in 2024, again, I mentioned 378 regular season touches, tax on an extra 100 touches because of their playoff and Super Bowl run. What's he going to do this year, right, based off of all those numbers? So when you break it down and you're looking just at face value, all of those numbers, you see regression. Oh, no, Saquon Barkley guaranteed to regress. Okay, well, every single situation there is not created equal. Let's be honest, guys. Saquon Barkley, first off, is in a objectively better situation than pretty much anyone else on that list, with the exception of probably Zeke Elliott. Zeke Elliott was in a great situation, and then the following year, he had the least amount of regression, 5%, right? So the other guys either missed time, they got injured, which is a concern, right? Because we're not in the business of accounting for injury, but there is, a reason that these guys are concerning after this amount of touches, because they can't really sustain that long term, at least over the last decade. But these other situations, right? Derrick Henry playing in Tennessee, right? He comes back as a 30-year-old running back, goes to Baltimore, and he has one of the best seasons of all time. JT, obviously a terrible situation. Josh Jacobs in a terrible situation in Vegas, and it goes on and on. Najee Harris, what was his production coming from as a rookie? A lot of it was his receiving upside. Big Ben retires. The dump-off stopped coming. So this really, it starts to make you think, okay, with Saquon Barkley going as pretty much a consensus top 2 pick in your fantasy drafts, and that's where most people will select him, is it worth really selecting him there when you know that he's pretty much objectively riskier than anyone else going up top there, being Jamar Chase, right, who is also going pretty much objectively top 2, and now there's a ton of wide receivers that are going in the top 6 picks. Mix in a little Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe a Bijan Robinson as well. We saw this situation last year with CMC, right? And the difference with the CMC argument is last year he already had a pre-established injury news that we knew could carry over into the year, where he had the calf tendonitis, and then it ended up being both of his calves. Saquon, for all intents and purposes right now in the middle of July, seems to be doing okay, right? He seems to be doing fine. So you either A, have to account for the injury, or B, you have to look at the stats here and say, I guess it's more likely than not that he regresses. But I want to take this further as well, because not all of these guys were making deep playoff runs like Saquon. They're actually, for the 482 touches that Saquon Barkley had in 2024, only 5 other running backs since 2001 have had at least 455 touches, and only 2 since 2006. You had Amon Green in 2003, and then you see that regression from 2003 to 2004, almost 10 points per game, a 9-point per game regression in 2004. I don't think he may have missed a couple of games there. Curtis Martin had 19.9 fantasy points per game, right? Hall of Famer Curtis Martin has a significant drop off in 2005. He only played 12 games, retired after the year. Caveat to Curtis Martin. Number one, he's a Hall of Fame running back. He had 10 straight years of 1,000+ rushing yards. He actually had this amount of volume earlier in his career, and he was able to repeat it multiple seasons as well. So this was just kind of this was towards the end of his career, so I'll give him a break there. Larry Johnson, you remember him on the Chiefs in 2006, 23.2 fantasy points per game, tons of regression in 2007. Arian Foster, the GOAT Arian Foster, who destroyed the Colts year in and year out, had a ton of regression in 2013. And then DeMarco Murray, who I will add, was playing on the Eagles in 2015. He did not miss time. He was just going to a totally different situation. That was, I think, a Chip Kelly offense, and it was pretty awful and pretty brutal. So, I mean, is 5 data points enough for us to go out here and conclude that, hey, Saquon Barkley is guaranteed to regress? I don't think we're going to go that far, and I don't think that even the people that are worried about this are even going to say that necessarily, but it is something that's worth talking about. And Avery, I want you to take it further and see honestly what your verdict is on Saquon, and are you comfortable taking him top 2 in your fantasy drafts?
And I really think, at the end of the day, people have used the Derrick Henry situation, for example. And when we've said, Derrick Henry has defied all statistical analysis suggesting that he would drop off at some point in time. For the last 3 years, we've been predicting that Derrick Henry, by we, I mean, everybody for the most part, unless you're just a gigabrain. And he hasn't fallen off. But people will make the strong argument that Derrick Henry is the exception and not the rule. And generally speaking, they are correct. I do think what you're seeing in the NFL, though, is the longevity of running backs being extended into later in their careers based on, the increased usage of committee backfields, the increase in the quality of sports medicine that we have, and all the different therapeutic, techniques that have been implemented to kind of extend these guys' lifetimes. But people will scream at us and say, yeah, no, you shouldn't think Derrick Henry is, what did the one guy say when in that comment? Remember that there was a comment about Derrick Henry and he was mad because we were...
How we couldn't say that he was gonna defy all odds and be the unicorn just because of one guy who defied all odds, which just happens to be Derrick Henry. So we can't bet on Derrick Henry because of Derrick Henry.
But Derrick Henry is not even the only guy here. I mean, let's look at last year. There was an older running back. We talked about this already. Chris McCaffrey really was the only guy in the top 12 outside of, Saquon Barkley himself at 11 last year that was going in the first round and was, on the other side of the age cliff, I think is what people say, in the second half of his career. The year before that, it was Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey balled out and won you leagues, and Austin Eckler, that was the year he didn't, right? 2023 would have been the year he didn't ball out, because 2022 was his league-winning year, and he was being drafted. And so that's another example of an older running back that didn't do it for you. Saquon Barkley, at that point in time, was on the Giants, and he did not ball out that year. He was solid, but he did miss a couple games. And so you go back to 2022, and you're looking at ADP for fantasy football drafts. It's JT, who we already talked about the next season, saw serious regressions. Christian McCaffrey, who... 2022 Christian McCaffrey would have been the Panthers' Christian McCaffrey, and he didn't do anything that year, right?
Correct. He missed, in 2021?
And it was 2022.
Yeah, I think he was traded midseason that year.
Eckler, again. Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, that was his drop-off year. Najee Harris had a drop-off year that year. So here's what I'm saying. And I'm not saying I'm not going to draft Saquon, because I don't think 5 data points is enough. I think the NFL is drastically different than it was, even when these guys, a lot of these guys, and you're looking at the examples that we have listed here, this is a long freaking time ago for the guys that have done the, 480 plus touches camp. Like, that's a very small camp. I don't think it's enough data to say, yeah, I'm not drafting Saquon because of this. But when you couple that with the fact that when you look back at running backs in the second half of their career that have been drafted in the first round of fantasy football drafts in the last 5 years, the hit rate is very low. And you would have been much better off most of the time taking a wide receiver in the first round. That's just, and I think wide receivers are safer. I think everybody's going to agree with that.
I think that's always been an argument about the safety of wide receivers over running backs in the first round, which we've always erred toward that side of the argument, I think, because you want to make sure that you're getting guaranteed production more than just like ceiling in the first round, because it's hard to get a league winner that you're already drafting in the first round, right?
Sure.
But even more nowadays, I mean, guys, we just saw a season last year where Jamar Chase had 23 points per game. We just saw a season in 2023 where CeeDee Lamb scored 23 points per game. You know who the best running backs, or what the best running backs are posting week in and week out in the NFL right now? About 22, 23 points per game. This is something that we're seeing a lot more often now. I mean, these elite level wide receivers that you're taking in the first round are getting more target volume across the board than we've ever seen in the history of the NFL, and more of a, not only a raised floor, but a raised ceiling. It used to be out of the ordinary to see these guys put up 20 plus points per game at the wide receiver position. That's why Cooper Kupp was goated in 2022, because we never seen it before. And he scored 21, 22 points per game. We're seeing it every year now, guys. We're seeing it every year with these top-end, high-end wide receivers because of the target volume they're getting, because of the opportunity, the situations that they're in. I will say this, while I am not going to go out there and bet on Saquon getting injured, while I'm not going to go out there and say that Saquon, even though he's in the best possible situation that you could ask of for an elite level running back in the NFL, is just going to disappoint at his price point this season, I will say this. I am no longer of the opinion that you have to take a running back if you want to raise your ceiling in the first round. It's not true anymore. It's not true. And if you don't want to take Saquon Barkley and you're picking first or second or even third overall, there are other options in that price range at other positions where you honestly can't go wrong. You can go just as right as if you selected Saquon. I do think you're taking on more risk if you select Saquon, and you can get the same amount of production at another position with a guy like CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase.
And as we'll talk about in our videos as we get closer to August, talk about draft theory, risk is really important. And you don't need to have too much risk on your fantasy team or it could end up screwing you.
Especially in the first 2 rounds, you know? Like, it's just...
And here's the thing, Saquon, as good as Saquon was last year, he was the running back 2 last year. If in PPR leagues, if I'm not mistaken, the running back 1 was Jahmyr Gibbs, right?
Yeah.
And Jahmyr Gibbs is
played all 17 and
behind him.
They sat Saquon for the last game. So
there's a perfect example. I don't think the takeaway from this video should be Nathan and Avery are telling you not to draft Saquon Barkley this year, because because actually I'm not.
I think we'll both end up having a share of Saquon in the number.
I'm going to say the same thing I said about Christian McCaffrey. I will draft one of Saquon Barkley, and I probably won't have enough fantasy teams to draft multiple. I think it would be too risky at that point. And you've seen this reflected, I think, in underdog drafts. His underdog ADP has dropped.
Slightly, yeah.
He's been sliding down in like the fourth, fifth pick in which wasn't happening even a month and a half ago. So I think people are starting to kind of share the same sentiment. But again, I will draft a Saquon Barkley this year. I mean, I feel like you'd be stupid not to. And I think it's more likely than not that Saquon comes out and defies the odds and he becomes the first guy to have this many touches 2 seasons in a row and produce. I think that's more likely than he gets injured. But I'm also not in the business of predicting injury. And so, again, the takeaway, honestly, is for you to make your own decision here. Here's the data, the analytics, and the historical running back trends in the top end of fantasy football drafts, the first round of fantasy football drafts the last 5 years, suggest that Saquon Barkley is a very risky pick. If you want to take him, he's worth the risk if he wins you the league.
Yep.
But if he loses you the league, we cannot say that the signs were not there that this was a possibility. It always is with these older running backs, and in this particular case with this much volume, I think it elevates our concerns about selecting a running back like Saquon in the first round. So again, we're not saying not to draft Saquon, but we're not fading Saquon. In our rankings, we had Saquon at 2, right?
Yeah.
That's higher than everybody else.
Yep. And
it should be. I mean, with what Saquon did last year and the money he's got now, I don't see a reason why we would. This would be the reason why we would. And again, analytics are important and they can be predictive, but you have to use context. And Nathan nailed the context of some of these other situations. They don't exactly translate. In fact, none of them translate one-to-one.
None of them even sniff the offensive line that Saquon Barkley's playing behind. A lot of those guys took a big beating with every single one of those touches given their situation. And Saquon's he's bottom of the league when it comes to yards before contact,
right?
Or top of the league yards before contact.
And it's because of the offensive line. So again, make your own decision. We're going to draft Saquon, but you need to know there is some inherent risk with doing it. As long as you're okay with it, he could end up winning you a league, and if you're not, it could pay off because if Saquon comes out and does see a huge drop off, you'll be on the right side of it. So two things that really help the channel out and help fund the research, help fund the channel, and support Nathan and I directly. Drop a like if you would. And also, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do. If we hit 50K on this channel this season, Nathan and I will get matching tattoos. I didn't tell him before this video. So 50K this season would be crazy. So I don't think it's gonna happen. But Nathan and I will get matching tattoos. So make sure you're subscribed if you haven't. More fantasy videos come. Also be on the lookout for our live streams, which will be starting here this week. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you later.